for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you for bringing this important matter to our attention. Ms. Gaines, in your experience, do the biological men competing in women's sports start competing before or after taking hormones?
I guess it depends, but I've certainly seen both ways.
Both? Okay. What guidelines does the National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, have regarding male to female student athletes being treated with testosterone suppression?
Well, from 2010 to 2022, they had a blanket policy in place for all sports that said just 12 months of hormone replacement therapy, and you compete with the team that aligns with your gender identity. But now, the NCAA, and I think this is incredibly telling, they're in a phase-out approach, meaning they want nothing to do with the topic, which I think is, again, if they wholeheartedly stood by the fact that they believed males could be women and become the same as women, they would stand by their policy, but they're not. They want to leave the responsibility and accountability up to each specific sport governing body. I believe they're in phase 3 or so of this approach, and it should be done by 2024, 2025.
Wouldn't men competing in women's sports at the collegiate level have already gone through puberty?
I don't know the exact statistic, but every single male that I've seen competing at the collegiate level in the women's category has gone through male puberty.
Right. If a male takes a year of testosterone suppressants, does his bone structure and muscle mass change enough for him to be similar to biological women?
No, nor does his height, nor does his lung capacity, nor does his his heart size, his wingspan, foot size, list goes on.
And doesn't testosterone have permanent effects through early life exposure?
Of course.
Okay. Ms. Gaines, another question. Once a man has started competing on a women's team, do they ever switch back to compete on male teams?
Not that I have seen. Actually, I will say there was a half marathon runner or a marathon runner who just won in the open category, the non-binary division at the Boston Marathon. Again, a male identifying as a woman. He's competed just this year alone in the men's, women's, and open category.
Okay. Ms. Graves, in 2022 you tweeted, maybe anti-trans laws are not actually about protecting women's sports. That's not true. These laws are not only to protect women's sports, but women too. Last year, a biological male playing on a women's volleyball team spiked a high-speed ball into a girl's face, causing a concussion. And I believe I have the video, if we can show that. You see, he just rifled it right into her head. And that's not the only example. Recently, during a field hockey game in Massachusetts, a biological male hit a female player in the face, reportedly knocking her teeth out. In another instance, 3 female rugby players were injured by a biological male player. And these are not just things these are not just rare occurrences. You can find them all over the place, even in Tennessee, if you would look close enough. Ms. Graves, do you have any concerns at all about biological males competing in women's sports injuring females?
I have deep concerns around injuries generally in sports, and I think the answer for this body, if they are interested, are the sorts of resources that reduce injuries.
No, but are they not higher among biological men?
Though, I mean, the thing is, I know this is hard to hear, that people who play sports, that injury is a part of it. And it is unfortunate, and yet people still play because they love it. They love playing.
Yes, ma'am, but when you take away their ability to compete against some, ma'am, I'm talking, please. I apologize, but when you take away their ability to compete by putting someone who is far superior biologically, that's the way God made them, that may become some disruptive talk to some folks up here, but that's just the way it is. It is not fair. So that was basically a yes to my question, and I want to...
No, I don't think it was. I think what I was trying to say, that I am concerned about injuries in sports, and I think there are things to do to reduce injuries in sports, and that additional resources to ensure things like coaching, to ensure things like equipment are more equal,
okay, let me stop
would actually reduce injuries that girls across this country face because they play sports.
Yes, ma'am, but they don't play contact sports against men. Now, Ms. Gaines, would you care to comment on that?
Sorry, yes, I absolutely agree. Allowing men into women's sports, of course, increases the severity and the greater likelihood of women getting injured, and to ignore that is entirely disingenuous. And let me just add one more point about this NCAA championships in particular that I find to be incredibly interesting that we haven't talked about in this committee. And that same meet where we had Thomas, who of course is a male identifying as a woman, we had another trans athlete who was a female identifying as a man. We were told we had to refer to this person using he, him pronouns. And so I guess I wish there were more Democratic members on the committee, because I would love to ask just plain and simple the question of, do we believe that that person that we are forced to compete against from Yale, Izzy Hennig, who now identifies as Isaac Hennig, should compete against the men? And why did this person compete with the women? And I can answer that question. It's because Izzy, now Isaac, would never and will never be able to compete at the same level against the male. So not only were we faced, facing this discrimination against male athletes, we also had a female identifying as a man competing with the women, which I have no problem with if there was no testosterone being taken.
Thank you all, and thank you, ladies. There are Democrats on this committee. They just chose not to be here because this is obviously such an obvious answer to these questions. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Lamafa for